a cold-hearted billionaire, collapses from a heart attack, only to wake up and find the nurse who saved his life is the same woman he fired 5 years ago without a second glance. Isla Raymond, once a quiet junior employee he destroyed with a signature, now holds his life in her hands. But what happens when guilt meets grace and broken pasts collide with unexpected love? This emotional journey of redemption, justice, and a love rekindled from pain will leave you breathless. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more soul-stirring stories like this one. The sharp scent of antiseptic hung in the air as the fluorescent lights hummed above, casting a sterile glow across the tiled floor of Riverside Community Clinic. Isla Raymond had barely returned from checking in on a post-op teenager when the doors to the ER burst open with a bang. A gurney rolled in fast, flanked by 2 paramedics shouting over the chaos. Male, mid-30s, unresponsive, suspected myocardial infarction, pulse faint, and pressure crashing. The patient's head lolled slightly to one side, his face pale as snow, lips tinged with an ominous blue. Sweat drenched his crisp white shirt, now clinging to his chest in sharp contrast to his gray slacks and half-removed tie. Isla's heart kicked up a beat, but her hands moved fast, pulling on gloves with the mechanical precision of experience. "Get him on oxygen, crash cart ready, leads attached now," she said, her voice low but unshakably clear. Her team responded like a well-rehearsed orchestra, IVs, defibrillator pads, vitals, all in motion in seconds. But as Isla leaned over to place the oxygen mask on the man's face, her fingers brushing his jaw to tilt his head slightly, she froze. The angle revealed a face, sharply defined jaw, a faint cleft in the chin, and a thin scar just beneath his left cheekbone. She blinked hard. No, it couldn't be, but the scar was unmistakable. Her breath caught. Her hands, always steady, trembled. Caleb West. The name hissed through her mind like static in her ears. 5 years ago, he'd been her mentor, her boss, her unspoken infatuation, and the man who'd destroyed her career with a single stroke of a pen. Her entire world had shattered in a glass-walled boardroom while he barely looked up from his tablet. She had pleaded, confused and desperate, clutching the letter of termination like it might explain the blind side. But he hadn't asked questions. He hadn't looked at her. He'd signed it, handed it off to HR, and walked away. Now here he was, silent, vulnerable, lying beneath her hands. "Isla?" Dr. Ames's voice cut through her daze. "We need compressions." She didn't answer immediately. The world felt unreal, tilted, distorted. But her training surged forward, louder than old pain. She nodded once and moved into position. "Starting compressions," she said aloud, her tone neutral, focused. Her palms pressed against Caleb's chest, sharp, rhythmic pushes as she counted under her breath. His body rocked with each movement, the beeping of the monitors frantic and unsteady. Dr. Ames called for epinephrine. A nurse injected it with practiced speed. The defibrillator charged as the technician announced, "Ready on your call." Isla stepped back for a breath as the paddles were pressed to his chest. "Clear." Caleb's body jolted violently. "Flatline." Again, "Clear." The line on the monitor blipped. Once, twice, then a faint rhythm began to trace across the screen. The room exhaled collectively. He was alive. Isla stood motionless, sweat at her temples, gloves damp, staring down at the man who had once held her future in his hands and dropped it without a glance. A murmur of approval came from Dr. Ames, a pat on her shoulder. "Excellent work, Isla. That was close." She nodded absently. Her eyes remained locked on Caleb, now stabilized and sedated, hooked up to machines that hummed quietly around him. She watched as the team wheeled him away to the observation room. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a tidal wave of emotions crashing through her chest. 5 years ago, he hadn't known what he took from her. Now, he didn't even know who had brought him back. She stood there alone as the ER settled back into its quiet rhythm, but inside her, nothing was quiet. Her past had just rolled in on a stretcher, breathless and broken, and for reasons she couldn't explain. Reasons that tangled between resentment and something even more dangerous. She had chosen to save him. Caleb stirred in the hospital bed, his eyelids fluttering weakly as the dull beeping of machines welcomed him back to consciousness. The antiseptic smell hit first, clean, sharp, sterile. Then the weight in his chest made itself known, like something had cracked open and barely stitched itself back together. The room was still, dimmed against the morning light. A silhouette stood by the window, holding a tablet, dressed in scrubs. His eyes narrowed, adjusting slowly. The figure turned, stepping into the soft glow of the monitors. She was younger than he expected, composed, her expression unreadable. "Good morning, Mr. West," she said, her voice even, smooth but distant. He blinked again. Something about her face snagged on the edge of recognition. "Where am I?" His voice was hoarse, cracked from the breathing tube. "You're at Riverside Community Clinic," she replied. "You suffered a heart attack, cardiac arrest. You've been here for nearly 2 days under observation. You're stable now." He frowned. "And you are?" "Isla, Nurse Raymond," she answered, her tone clipped but not unkind. The name didn't click, not yet. But the way she said it, calm but cool, like someone very intentionally drawing a line. "You've been my attending nurse?" he asked, studying her more closely. "Yes, since your arrival." He shifted slightly, pain flashing across his face. "I need my phone. I have to." "We've kept your belongings secure," Isla said, stepping forward to adjust the IV. "But per doctor's orders, no stress, no calls, no emails. Your heart needs rest." "I run a multi-billion-dollar company," he muttered, the edge returning to his voice. "I don't have the luxury of rest." Isla's fingers paused briefly, hovering over the monitor cable. She inhaled, steadying herself. The cadence of his voice hadn't changed. The same clipped confidence, the same detached superiority. He still didn't know, still didn't see her. "You're lucky to be here at all," she said, her voice neutral, but edged. "If the paramedics had arrived 5 minutes later, we'd be having a very different conversation." That made him pause. His gaze shifted to her, narrowed. There it was again, that nagging familiarity. "You seem familiar," he said slowly, eyes tracing her features like trying to reconstruct a dream. "Have we met before?" She hesitated, just a second, but it was enough for the air to thicken between them. "I work here often," she said carefully. "Maybe you've seen me around." Caleb didn't look convinced. His brow furrowed deeper. "I don't forget faces." Her voice came softer, nearly a whisper, but it cut sharper than a scalpel. "Maybe yours just forgot me." Something about the way she said it lodged itself in his brain, a thread pulling at the edge of a memory he couldn't quite unravel. He stared at her, but she didn't give him more. She turned away, already heading for the door. "I'll have Dr. Ames speak with you shortly. Try to rest, Mr. West." The door softly behind her. Caleb leaned back, the silence pressing in heavier than the weight of the IVs tethering him to the bed. He stared at the ceiling, but his mind wasn't still. There was something about that nurse, the way she looked at him not with awe or kindness, but like she carried history in her eyes, a history that involved him. And yet he couldn't place it. Hours passed. He asked for his phone again and again, until finally it was placed in his hand. But when he opened his emails and voice memos, nothing held his attention for long. His eyes kept drifting back to the door. Later, as Isla returned to check his vitals, she found him sitting upright, scrolling. "Still working?" she asked, her voice neutral again. "I have an empire to run," he said without looking up. "Your heart doesn't care," she replied. He glanced up, caught by her tone. There was something in her voice now, steady, restrained. But beneath it, something that sounded like disappointment, or maybe history. "You talk like you know something about losing things," he said casually. Her eyes didn't flinch. "I do." He watched her, the confidence in his smirk faltering as she adjusted his monitor. Her hand brushed the edge of the bed, and he caught the way it trembled, just slightly. And in that tremor, something clicked. "Wait," he said, voice low. "Are you talking about me?" Isla didn't look at him. "Yes." The word landed like a stone in the room. "I don't," he stammered, suddenly unsure. "Who are you?" She looked at him now, fully. No longer a nurse with a chart, just a woman standing in front of a man who had once signed her future away like it meant nothing. "I was a junior associate at Everline Capital 5 years ago. I took the fall for a mistake I didn't make. You signed the termination letter. You never even looked at me." The silence was deafening. Caleb sat still, lips parting as recognition crept across his face like a slow, sharp sunrise. "Isla? Raymond." "Congratulations," she said flatly. "You remember me now." The room had gone still long after Isla left, but Caleb couldn't shake the way she'd said his name. Not like it belonged to a billionaire, but like it was something broken, cracked down the middle. He sat there in bed, no longer interested in emails or market trends, just haunted by the slow return of a memory he'd buried so deep it almost felt like someone else's mistake. Isla Raymond. He remembered the name now, barely, but the face was harder. She had been quiet back then, efficient, polite, always early, always staying late. He'd never looked twice, not until now. As night fell over Riverside Clinic, Caleb's fingers moved with a kind of desperation he hadn't felt in years. He pulled his tablet from the side table, ignoring the ache in his chest as he sat up straighter. Password, security clearance, HR archives. The familiar walls of corporate firewalls slowed him, but not for long. He was still Caleb West. He still knew where the bodies were buried and how to dig. It took 3 tries and a backdoor admin login he hadn't used in years before the archive unlocked. The files loaded slowly, each name a dull ache. He typed Isla Raymond and hit enter. There it was. Termination file dated 5 years ago. Cause: mishandling of financial reports. Risk to client trust. Breach of protocol. No review. No appeal. He scrolled further. Attached at the bottom was a private HR memo, forwarded 2 weeks later. His breath caught. Department Manager Calvin Reese has acknowledged responsibility for the final data submission. Error originated from his personal files. Junior Associate Raymond flagged discrepancies, but her objections were overridden. Caleb's pulse thudded in his ears. She hadn't just been innocent. She had tried to stop the mistake. And he had signed her away. No investigation, no questions. Just a signature on the line, a name scratched from the system, and a young woman shown the door with a security escort. His hands went cold. He remembered now, Reese had been frantic about a major investor pulling out, claiming misrepresented figures. Caleb had demanded swift action. "We need someone to take the fall," Reese had said. "It's junior level. She's new. No press attention." And Caleb had nodded. That's all it had taken, a nod. The weight of it slammed into him like a second cardiac arrest. He had ruined her, her start, her career, her confidence, because it was easier than dealing with the real issue. Because it fit the narrative. Now she was here. Saving lives. Saving his life. And he hadn't even remembered her face. The monitor beside him beeped softly, tracing the rhythm of a heart that was no longer just damaged. It was ashamed. Caleb turned off the screen, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. His chest rose and fell in shallow waves. He thought he'd built a legacy. But what kind of man was he, really? He didn't sleep that night. Even after the nurses dimmed the lights and the hallway quieted to a hum, Caleb lay in the dark, seeing her eyes, steady, calm, but carrying a storm behind them. He couldn't stop hearing the words she'd said. "You didn't even know my name." The worst part was, she was right. He'd signed hundreds of terminations over the years, but hers felt different now. Not because of what it cost him, but because of what it had cost her. She had worked hard, been loyal, and he had taken it all without blinking. By morning, he felt more exhausted than after the heart attack itself. He barely spoke during rounds, didn't ask for his phone. When Ela came in to check his IV, she found him unusually still, watching her with a strange expression, like he wanted to say something but didn't know where to begin. "Vitals are stable," she said, noting numbers on her chart without looking at him. He hesitated. Then, quietly, "I found the file." She paused mid-note. "You flagged the mistake." Reese admitted it later. Still, she didn't look at him. Too late now. "I didn't know. That's the point." Silence stretched between them, long and raw. Caleb sat with it for once, not trying to fill the air with control or excuses. "I'm sorry," he said finally, voice low. "Truly." Ela looked at him now, her eyes not soft but not hardened either. "You can't undo it." "I know." "Then don't pretend like an apology fixes it." "I'm not," he said, and this time something in his voice cracked, not with weakness but with truth. "But I'm trying to understand it, all of it." Isla took a step back, heart thudding. She didn't forgive him. Not yet. But for the first time since that boardroom 5 years ago, she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Regret that wasn't performative. She turned away. And for the first time in his life, Caleb West didn't chase the silence. He sat in it. Let it sting. Let it stay. Rain pelted the clinic windows like 1,000 whispered reminders of the night Caleb had collapsed. The storm had knocked out the power 20 minutes ago, plunging Riverside into flickering emergency light. Isla moved quickly through the dim corridors, flashlight in hand, her steps echoing against the slick linoleum as she checked backup systems and patient rooms. The hallway outside the recovery wing felt colder than usual. The air tinged with moisture and something heavier, like something unspoken had been sitting there all along. She had done her best to stay distant since their last exchange. Caleb hadn't brought up the past again, and she hadn't offered anything more. But something had shifted. He no longer barked orders for his phone. He stopped asking about market shares or conference calls. She'd even caught him reading, really reading, a memoir she'd left on his nightstand without comment. But the silence between them was thick, not empty, like the quiet between lightning and thunder. As she rounded the corner, her foot hit a shallow puddle from a leaking ceiling tile. Her ankle twisted, and she let out a startled gasp, arms flailing as the flashlight slipped from her grip and clattered against the wall. But the floor never hit her. Strong arms caught her mid-fall. For a second, everything froze. Her breath, her body, her heartbeat. Caleb. He was in a patient tee, barefoot, IV band still clinging to his forearm, his expression tight with concern. "I thought you were asleep," she whispered, stunned, still half cradled in his arms. "I heard you fall," he said, his voice rough, quiet. "I couldn't just lie there, not again." Her breath caught again, but for a different reason this time. There was something raw in his eyes. No pride, no posture, just something achingly real. They stood like that for a moment, suspended in the red emergency light. Isla's hand had unconsciously curled into his shirt, her pulse pounding. She knew she should step back, remind him he was her patient, remind herself he had once crushed her career with a single signature. But she didn't move. "I'm fine," she said finally, her voice softer, shakier than she wanted. "I know," he replied, but he didn't let go. The storm outside howled, but inside the silence wrapped around them again. His still gently at her waist was warm despite the chill in the air. Her cheek was inches from his, and his eyes, those unreadable, once arrogant eyes, were now completely open, like he wasn't guarding anything anymore. "Elisa," he said her name like it was the only true word he'd spoken all week. She stepped back slowly. He let her, reluctantly, like someone releasing a part of himself he wasn't ready to lose. Her cheeks were flushed, but not from the stumble. "You shouldn't be out of bed," she said, stooping to retrieve her flashlight. "I'll survive," he answered, his voice lighter now, a flicker of warmth behind it. She looked up at him, then smiled. Just a flicker, but it was there. He chuckled softly, and the sound surprised them both. It wasn't cold or calculated. It was human. "Come on," she said, turning toward the hallway. "Let's get you back before Dr. Ames finds out and sends you to ICU for wandering." He followed, slower this time, but close. Neither of them spoke again, but something in the air between them had changed. Their steps were more in sync, their silence more comfortable. For the first time, Ela began to wonder if healing wasn't just about heartbeats and medications. Maybe it was also about timing, about the right person being there when you fall and choosing to catch you. In the days after the storm, Caleb surprised everyone. He no longer demanded his phone the moment he woke up. He read biographies, essays, even a medical ethics book Ela left on his tray. He asked questions now, real ones. About the clinic. About her. More than once, she caught him watching her, not with calculation, but with curiosity, as if trying to learn who she was, not just who she used to be. Then one afternoon, Dr. Ames caught her in the hallway holding a file. "You didn't tell me your community clinic proposal got funded," he said with a smile. Isla froze. "What are you talking about? They rejected it months ago. I never resubmitted." "Well," Dr. Ames said with a shrug, "someone did, through a partner org, anonymously, and it came through fast." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder. Full funding, equipment, mobile units, her dream. That evening, she walked into Caleb's room. He looked up from his book, then immediately saw the look on her face. "You knew," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. "I may have spoken to someone," quietly. "Why?" He closed the book. "Because I've spent a lot of time building things that only serve people like me. But what you're building, it actually matters." Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said. "That's why I wanted to." And for the first time, Isla didn't walk away. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the courtyard of the newly opened Raymond West Wellness Center, its silk ribbon fluttering gently in the breeze. Rows of white folding chairs lined the space, filled with community members, patients, local leaders, and journalists murmuring in anticipation. Balloons danced in clusters, children giggled as they chased each other near the reception tent, and in the center of it all stood Isla, dressed in crisp white, her name tag glinting just above her heart. She stepped to the podium, her composure steady but her heart full. Her speech was brief, powerful, honoring the patients who inspired the vision, the staff who believed in it, and the quiet partnerships that made it real. When she stepped down, the applause was warm, rising like a tide, and then Caleb stood up. He wore a simple navy suit, no tie, the collar open just enough to remind everyone this was not the corporate Caleb West of boardrooms and billion-dollar acquisitions. This was a man who had unraveled and reassembled his entire life. His voice, when he began to speak, was calm and steady, but threaded with truth. "I used to live by numbers," he said, eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Isla. "Quarterly reports, market shares, margins, every decision was a calculation, every person a piece on a board." He paused. "Until one day I signed a paper I didn't read. It ended someone's career. A woman who should have been seen, nurtured, believed in, but I didn't see her. Not then." The crowd fell silent. Years passed. I built more, grew more, won more. But then one night, my heart gave out, and I woke up to find that same woman saving my life. Not once, but again and again. Ila's eyes welled as he stepped away from the microphone and approached her directly. His hand reached into his jacket. Gasps rippled as he pulled out a small velvet box. "I've signed thousands of contracts in my life," he said, now just feet from her. "But today I want to sign something different, something that means more than any deal I've ever made." He dropped to one knee. The world blurred around them. "Isla Raymond," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saw the best in me when I only showed you the worst. You gave me purpose when I thought I was only power. You healed my heart in every way that matters. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled freely down Ila's cheeks as she nodded through her trembling smile. "Yes," she whispered. Then stronger. "Yes, Caleb. Yes." The applause that erupted was thunderous, clapping, cheers, even a joyful whistle from Dr. Ames. But for Isla and Caleb, the moment was still, suspended in its own quiet rhythm. He slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, slow and reverent, as if finally catching up with every emotion they'd both buried and rebuilt. That evening, after the celebration faded into twilight and the guests had long gone home, Isla and Caleb walked hand in hand down the shoreline just beyond the city. They were barefoot, the sand cool beneath their feet, the sky painted in streaks of lavender and gold. Waves whispered at their ankles as if echoing the quiet between them, the kind that needed no words. Isla leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice low. "If I hadn't saved you that night, everything would be different." Caleb stopped walking, turned to face her. "If you hadn't saved me," he said softly, "maybe I'd still be alive, but I wouldn't be living." He reached for her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers, then brushed a kiss across her forehead with a tenderness that erased every boardroom, every mistake, every scar between them. There were no ghosts in that moment, no fear of what had been, no anxiety about what would come. There was only now, clear and grounded, a heartbeat shared between two people who had learned the hard way that love wasn't about perfection. It was about redemption, about staying, about choosing each other, even when the path back was uphill. The waves rolled on beside them, and their steps moved forward, together. Some stories aren't just about romance. They're about growth, forgiveness, and the quiet power of second chances. The Pulse Between Us is one such story. It reminds us that the past, no matter how painful or unresolved, does not define the future. Mistakes can scar, yes, but they can also transform. Caleb learned that power without compassion is hollow, and Isla proved that strength doesn't always roar. It often whispers through grace, perseverance, and kindness, even when it's undeserved. We often underestimate the weight of our choices, especially when they impact others in ways we'll never see. But healing begins the moment we stop running from those choices and begin to confront them with honesty, humility, and heart. This story also speaks to something deeper. The idea that redemption doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it simply means showing up differently, more present, more open, more human. In a world that often celebrates perfection and ambition, this story calls us back to something more lasting: connection. real, raw, imperfect connection. And the belief that even those who've hurt us can change, and those who've been hurt can rise. Wherever you're listening from, we hope this story moved you as deeply as it moved us to share it. If it reminded you that love can grow even from the hardest of ground, and that the heart always remembers who helped it beat again, then this story found its way to the right place. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more powerful tales that touch the heart, heal the soul, and remind us that hope is always within reach. We'll see you in the next one.